My name is Wayne, and I am 54 years old. I am sitting in a cold waiting room at a neurology clinic, watching my wife Linda through a glass window as a doctor examines her. 32 years of marriage, and I never imagined I would bring her here. It all started when our son Marcus moved back home with his daughter after his divorce. I thought our family was finally coming together again. I had no idea that what the doctor was about to whisper to me would shatter everything I believed about my own son. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you are going to want to hear every word of what that doctor said to me. Linda and I met 32 years ago at a small outdoor concert in Columbus, Ohio. She was 22, wearing a yellow sundress, laughing at something her friend said. I was standing by the lemonade stand, trying to work up the courage to talk to her. When our eyes met, something shifted in my chest. I walked over, introduced myself, and we talked until the stars came out. 3 years later, we were married in her parents' backyard, with 50 guests and a homemade cake her mother baked. Linda became an elementary school teacher. She had this gift with children, a patience I could never match. She would come home with stories about her students, their little victories and struggles, and her eyes would light up like she was talking about her own kids. I fell deeper in love with her every single day. I worked as an industrial electrician. The job took me away from home more than I wanted. Night shifts, weekend calls, traveling to different plants across the state. But every paycheck went straight to our family. I wanted Linda to have security. I wanted our future children to have opportunities I never had growing up. We saved for 10 years before we could afford our house. A modest 2-story place in the suburbs, with a big backyard and an old oak tree that dropped acorns every fall. Linda planted roses along the fence. I built a tire swing for the kids we hoped to have. That house became our sanctuary, the place where we dreamed our biggest dreams. When Marcus came along, our world expanded in ways I never expected. He was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, 7 pounds and 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and his mother lungs. Linda held him like he was made of glass, and I remember thinking I would do anything to protect this tiny human. Linda made the decision to stay home with Marcus. She gave up her teaching career, at least temporarily, because she wanted to be there for every first step, every first word, every scraped knee. I worked double shifts to make up for the lost income. Some weeks, I barely saw my son awake. But I told myself it was worth it. I was building a future for him. Marcus was a bright kid. He learned to read before kindergarten thanks to Linda patient tutoring. He brought home straight A report cards and made the honor roll every semester. When he got a scholarship to Ohio State, I cried in the garage where no one could see me. All those years of sacrifice had paid off. My son was going to have a better life than I did. But something changed after college. Marcus met Stephanie during his junior year. She came from money, the kind of family that took vacations to Europe and drove cars that cost more than our house. She was polite enough to our faces, but I always sensed she looked down on us. Our little home was not impressive to her. Our simple life was not exciting enough. After the wedding, Marcus started pulling away. Phone calls became less frequent. Visits home happened maybe twice a year, always brief, always with Stephanie checking her watch. Linda would bake Marcus' favorite cookies and wrap them up for him to take, and I would see them left behind on the counter after they drove away. When Emma was born, we thought things might change. A grandchild was supposed to bring families closer together. But Stephanie controlled everything. She decided when we could visit, which was almost never. She decided what gifts were appropriate, which meant most of ours were returned. Linda kept a photo of Emma on the mantel, updating it whenever we managed to get a new picture, which was not often. For 5 years, we watched our granddaughter grow up through occasional photographs and brief video calls where Emma barely knew who we were. Linda never complained out loud, but I could see the sadness in her eyes every time she looked at that photo on the mantel. Then one evening in late September, Marcus called. His voice was different, stripped of the confidence he usually projected. He told me that Stephanie had filed for divorce. She was keeping the house most of their savings, and she did not want custody of Emma. Marcus was broken and asking if he could come home. Linda grabbed the phone from my hand before I could answer. Of course, she said. Come home. Bring Emma. Stay as long as you need. When I looked at my wife that night, her eyes were shining with tears, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. She said this was our second chance, our opportunity to be the grandparents we always wanted to be, to finally have our son back. I believed her. I believed everything was about to get better. Marcus arrived on a grey October morning with a rented moving truck and a scared little girl holding a stuffed rabbit. Emma was 6 years old, with her father dark hair and her mother cautious eyes. She stood on our porch, looking up at the house like it was a foreign country. Linda knelt down to Emma level and spoke softly. She did not rush or overwhelm. She simply said hello and asked if Emma wanted to see the backyard where her daddy used to play. Emma nodded slowly, and Linda took her hand with such gentleness that I felt my throat tighten. I helped Marcus unload boxes while Linda gave Emma a tour. His old bedroom still had the same blue walls from high school. We added a small bed near the window for Emma decorated with princess sheets Linda had bought the day after Marcus called. Those first few weeks felt like a dream I did not want to wake from. Linda came alive in a way I had not seen in years. She and Emma baked cookies together, the kitchen filling with flour dust and giggles. They read stories every night, Emma curled up against Linda, while my wife did all the character voices. They collected leaves in the backyard and pressed them between the pages of old books. Emma started calling Linda Grandma within the first month. Not the formal grandmother that Stephanie had insisted upon during the rare visits, but Grandma warm and casual and full of love. Linda would look at me after Emma said it, and her smile could have powered the whole neighborhood. Marcus was busy looking for work. He spent hours on his laptop sending out resumes, taking phone interviews. He was rarely home during the day, and when he was, he seemed distracted. I did not think much of it at first. Divorce is hard. Job hunting is stressful. I gave him space. But then I started noticing things. One evening, Linda and Emma were in the kitchen making dinner together. Emma was standing on a step stool stirring something in a pot while Linda guided her hand. They were laughing about something, and the sound filled the house with warmth. Marcus walked in, and the laughter stopped. He did not say anything harsh. He just stood in the doorway watching them with this expression I could not quite read. Then he said, "Mom, you do not need to spend so much time with her. She needs space to adjust." Linda looked confused. She said they were just making dinner together. Marcus shook his head and said Emma needs routine, not constant attention. Linda nodded slowly and stepped back from the stove. Emma looked up at her grandmother with hurt in her eyes, not understanding why Grandma suddenly moved away. That night, Linda asked me if she was being too clingy. She wondered if maybe Marcus was right, if she was overwhelming Emma with too much attention. I told her that was ridiculous. Emma clearly loved spending time with her. But Linda seemed uncertain, and that uncertainty stayed with her. Over the following weeks, I noticed Marcus making more comments like that. He would interrupt when Linda and Emma were playing. He would suggest that Emma should spend time alone in her room. He would remind Linda that she was not Emma mother, as if Linda had somehow forgotten. Linda began second-guessing herself. She would start to reach for Emma, then pull back. She would begin to suggest an activity, then change her mind. The joyful grandmother I had watched emerge was slowly retreating back into her shell. One night, I woke up around 3 in the morning and found the bed empty beside me. I walked through the dark house checking rooms until I found Linda sitting in the living room. She was on the couch staring at nothing, her hands folded in her lap. I asked her what was wrong. She turned to me with red-rimmed eyes and said she thought something was wrong with her. She said she kept forgetting things. Little things. What she said an hour ago. Where she put her keys. Whether she had already asked Emma a question. I sat beside her and took her hands. They were cold. I told her everyone forgets things sometimes. I told her she was fine. But she shook her head and said no, it was more than that. She said Marcus had pointed out several times that she repeated herself, that she seemed confused. I did not know what to say. Linda had always been sharp, organized, the one who remembered every birthday and appointment. Hearing her doubt herself this way was unsettling. I promised I would make an appointment with our family doctor. We would figure out what was going on. She leaned against me in the dark, and I held her until the sun came up. But even as I reassured her, a cold feeling was settling in my stomach. Something was not right in our home. I just could not see what it was yet. The changes in Marcus' behavior became harder to ignore as the weeks passed. He installed security cameras throughout the house one Saturday afternoon, without asking Linda or me first. When I questioned him about it, he said it was for Emma's safety. He said we could never be too careful. But the cameras felt like eyes following us everywhere. Linda started avoiding certain rooms. She told me she felt watched, like she could not relax in her own home anymore. I tried to dismiss her concerns, but I felt it too. Marcus began checking on Linda and Emma constantly. If Linda took Emma outside to play, he would appear at the window within minutes, watching. If Linda read Emma a story at bedtime, he would interrupt before the story ended, saying Emma needed to sleep. Every interaction between grandmother and granddaughter seemed to make him uncomfortable. One evening after dinner, Marcus asked to speak with me privately. We went out to the garage and he closed the door behind us. His face was serious, and he spoke in a low voice, even though no one else could hear. "Dad," he said, "I think Mom might have some kind of mental problem." I felt like he had punched me in the chest. I asked what he meant. He told me he had noticed her acting strange around Emma, staring at her too long, forgetting conversations, seeming confused about simple things. I told him his mother was just adjusting to having a child in the house again. It had been years since she spent this much time with a kid. But Marcus shook his head firmly. He said this was different. He said he was worried she might do something to hurt Emma without meaning to. The accusation hit me like ice water. I told him that was absurd. Linda would never hurt anyone, especially not her own granddaughter. She loved Emma more than anything. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me with what seemed like genuine concern. "I know you do not want to see it," he said. "But I have been watching her. Something is not right. We need to get her evaluated by a professional." That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed listening to Linda breathe beside me, trying to reconcile the woman I knew with the picture Marcus had painted. She was the same Linda she had always been. Patient, kind, loving. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I hated myself for letting it take root. A few days later, I took Linda to see our family doctor. I did not tell her about my conversation with Marcus. I just said it would be good to get a checkup, make sure everything was okay. Linda agreed without argument, which worried me more than if she had protested. Dr. Patterson ran basic tests. Blood work, cognitive assessments, the usual examinations for someone in their early 50s. Everything came back normal. He said Linda might be experiencing some stress-related symptoms, but there was nothing physically or mentally wrong with her. He recommended rest and perhaps some relaxation techniques. I felt relieved. I drove home ready to tell Marcus that his concerns were unfounded. But when I shared the results, Marcus was not satisfied. He said family doctors miss things all the time. He said we needed a specialist, a neurologist, someone who could do a real evaluation. Linda was in the room when he said this, and I watched her face crumble. She looked at her son, then at me, and I could see she was starting to believe something was wrong with her. Marcus had planted the same seed in her mind that he had planted in mine. That weekend, Marcus showed me something on his phone. It was footage from one of the cameras he had installed. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m. The video showed Linda standing in the doorway of Emma's room, not moving, just standing there in the dark, looking at the sleeping child. "Look at this," Marcus said. "This is not normal behavior. She does this almost every night. She just stands there watching Emma sleep. It is creepy, Dad. It is disturbing." I watched the video over and over. Linda looked like a ghost in the infrared footage, her face blank, her body still. She stood there for nearly 15 minutes before finally walking away. I had never seen her do this. I did not know she left our bed at night. For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid, not of Linda, but of what might be happening to her. I agreed to make an appointment with a neurologist. I told myself I was doing this to help my wife. I was being a good husband. I did not realize I was playing right into my son's hands. The neurology clinic was in a medical complex about 40 minutes from our home. Linda sat silently in the passenger seat, the whole drive, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded without looking at me. "I feel like I am losing myself," she finally said as we pulled into the parking lot. "And I am losing our son. He looks at me like I am a stranger, like I am dangerous." I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, but I could not, because I had seen the same looks she was describing. Marcus watched his mother the way you watch an unpredictable animal, with caution, with distance. Dr. Harold Brennan was a tall man in his 60s, with grey hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was filled with brain models and framed certificates, the kind of room that made you feel you were in capable hands. He shook Linda's hand warmly and invited her to sit. The examination took nearly 2 hours. Dr. Brennan administered a battery of tests, memory assessments, cognitive function evaluations, reflex tests, emotional response exercises. He asked Linda about her sleep patterns, her diet, her stress levels. He asked about her family history, her relationships, her daily routines. Linda answered everything honestly. She told him about feeling watched in her own home, about second-guessing herself constantly, about the fear that she was losing her mind. Dr. Brennan listened without judgment, taking careful notes, asking clarifying questions. When the testing was complete, Dr. Brennan asked Linda to wait in the reception area. He said he wanted to discuss the results with me privately first. Linda looked at me with fear in her eyes, and I squeezed her hand before she walked out. The doctor closed the door and sat across from me. He did not speak immediately. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Wayne," he said, "your wife does not have a neurological disorder." I exhaled so hard I nearly laughed with relief. I asked if he was sure. He nodded firmly. "I have been doing this for 35 years, he said. "I have seen hundreds of patients with early-onset dementia, Alzheimer, and various cognitive impairments. Your wife shows none of the markers. Her memory is excellent. Her cognitive function is above average for her age. There is nothing wrong with her brain." I did not understand. If nothing was wrong, why was she behaving so strangely? Why was she forgetting things? Why was she standing in Emma doorway at 3 in the morning? Dr. Brennan leaned forward in his chair. His voice dropped lower, and he glanced at the closed door before continuing. What I am about to tell you may be difficult to hear, he said. But I believe your wife is exhibiting classic symptoms of psychological manipulation, specifically a form of abuse called gaslighting. I had heard the term before, but never really understood what it meant. The doctor explained. Gaslighting is when someone manipulates another person into doubting their own reality. The abuser tells the victim they said or did things they do not remember. They question the victim's memory, perception, and sanity. Over time, the victim begins to believe something is genuinely wrong with them. I shook my head. Who would do that to Linda? We had been married for over 30 years. I would never manipulate her like that. Dr. Brennan stood up and walked to the window. He spoke with his back to me. The symptoms your wife described, the constant second guessing, the feeling of being watched, the belief that she is losing her mind, these do not come from internal dysfunction. They come from external pressure. Someone in her life is making her feel this way. He turned to face me, and his expression was deadly serious. Mr. Wayne, I need to ask you something directly. Who suggested your wife needed to see a neurologist? I told him it was our son Marcus. The doctor nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he already suspected. He moved closer to me and dropped his voice to barely above a whisper. What he said next changed everything. Keep her away from your son immediately. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. My son Marcus. The boy I had sacrificed everything for. Dr. Brennan explained that based on everything Linda had told him, the pattern of behavior pointed directly to Marcus. The constant monitoring, the subtle suggestions that she was forgetting things, the cameras, the isolation from her granddaughter. These were textbook manipulation tactics. Your wife is not sick, the doctor said. She is being psychologically abused. And if it continues, she could develop genuine anxiety disorders, depression, and possibly even trauma-induced cognitive problems. You need to protect her. I walked out of that office in a daze. Linda was waiting in the reception area, her face pale with worry. She asked what the doctor said. Was she sick? Was she losing her mind? I looked at my wife, the woman who had stood by me for 32 years, who had given up her career to raise our son, who had welcomed him back into our home without hesitation when he needed help. And I realized I had been blind. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. You are not sick, I said. You are not crazy. And I am going to fix this. On the drive home, my mind raced through every interaction, every comment, every suspicious moment from the past few months. The doctor words echoed in my head. Keep her away from your son immediately. But I needed to understand why. What possible reason could Marcus have for doing this to his own mother? For the next several days, I watched Marcus like a hawk, but I was careful not to let him know anything had changed. I pretended the neurology appointment had confirmed our concerns about Linda. I told him we were still waiting on some test results, buying myself time to figure out what was really happening. I started keeping a small notebook in my pocket. Every time Marcus made a comment that seemed designed to make Linda doubt herself, I wrote it down. Every time he interrupted a moment between Linda and Emma, I noted the time and what was said. A pattern emerged quickly. Marcus would wait until Linda made a statement, then later tell her she had said something different. He would move objects around the house and suggest Linda had misplaced them. He would recall conversations that never happened and insist Linda was forgetting things. It was subtle, but constant, a steady drip of doubt that was slowly eroding her confidence. One afternoon when Marcus was out, I made a phone call I had been dreading. I called Stephanie. She answered on the third ring, and her voice was cold when she heard it was me. But when I explained why I was calling her, tone changed completely. "You have finally seen it?" she said. I wondered how long it would take. Stephanie told me everything. She said Marcus had done the same thing to her throughout their marriage. He would question her memory, her judgment, her sanity. He would tell her she was imagining problems. He would isolate her from friends and family who tried to point out what was happening. She said the divorce was her escape. She had finally recognized what he was doing after seeing a therapist who identified the pattern. She did not fight for custody of Emma because she was too broken to fight for anything. She just wanted out. "That is why I let you have Emma," she said. "I knew if she stayed with me, Marcus would use her as a weapon. At least with you and Linda, she has a chance at a normal childhood." I asked Stephanie why she never told us any of this. She laughed bitterly. "Would you have believed me?" she asked. "Would you have believed that your perfect son was a manipulator?" She was right. I would not have believed it. Not back then. Not until I saw it for myself. After I hung up with Stephanie, I started looking into Marcus' finances. Frank, my old friend, who had connections everywhere, helped me dig into records I should not have had access to. What we found made my stomach turn. Marcus was drowning in debt. Over $80,000 owed to various creditors, much of it from gambling, online poker sites, sports betting accounts. He had taken cash advances on credit cards that were maxed out. He was being threatened by collection agencies. And then I found the life insurance policies. Marcus had taken out policies on both Linda and me, listing himself as the beneficiary. Large policies. The kind that would pay out enough to clear all his debts with plenty left over. But that was not all. In the state of Ohio, if a person is declared mentally incompetent, their next of kin can petition for conservatorship and control of their assets. Our house was paid off. We had retirement savings. We had investments Linda's father had left her when he passed. If Marcus could get Linda declared mentally incompetent, he could take control of everything. I sat in my garage that night, surrounded by old tools and memories, and I wept. This was my son, the baby I had held on the day he was born, the little boy I had taught to ride a bike in the driveway, the young man whose college graduation had been the proudest moment of my life. And he was planning to destroy his own mother for money. I thought about all the years I had worked double shifts coming home, exhausted missing baseball games and school plays, because I was building a future for him. I thought about Linda, who had given up her career to raise him, who had baked him cookies and helped him with homework and loved him unconditionally. This was how he repaid us. I called Frank around midnight. He answered immediately, because that is the kind of friend he is. "I know what Marcus is doing," I told him, "and I need your help to stop him." Frank did not hesitate. "What do you need?" he asked. I told him I needed a lawyer, a good one, someone who understood conservatorship law and elder abuse. Frank said he knew exactly who to call. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, sharp and heavy. But underneath it, a new resolve was forming. I had spent my whole life protecting my family. I was not about to stop now. The next morning, I began putting together a case. Frank connected me with a lawyer named Patricia Holloway, who specialized in elder abuse and family manipulation cases. She listened to everything I told her and said she had seen variations of this pattern dozens of times. She advised me to document everything meticulously. I installed my own hidden cameras in areas Marcus did not know about. I recorded conversations using my phone when he made comments designed to undermine Linda. I saved the footage from his cameras that he did not know I could access. Meanwhile, I needed to protect Linda. I went back to Dr. Brennan and asked for a formal written evaluation, stating that Linda had no neurological impairments and showed no signs of mental incompetence. He provided it without hesitation, along with detailed clinical notes explaining the signs of psychological manipulation he had observed. The hardest part was telling Linda the truth. I waited until Marcus took Emma to the park one Saturday morning. Linda and I sat at the kitchen table, and I held her hands while I explained what I had discovered. I told her about Dr. Brennan's real diagnosis, about Stephanie confirmation, about Marcus' debts and the insurance policies and the conservatorship plan. Linda did not cry at first. She just sat there very still, processing everything. Then she said something that broke my heart. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "But I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem." I pulled her close and told her she was never the problem. Our son was the problem, and we were going to fix it together. Linda spent the next few days reviewing the evidence I had gathered. She watched the recordings of Marcus' manipulation with tears streaming down her face. But with each recording, I watched something change in her. The confusion and self-doubt were replaced by clarity and anger. She had been victimized, but she was not going to be a victim anymore. She asked me what we were going to do. I told her I had a plan, but it would not be easy. We would have to confront Marcus. We would have to send him away, and we would have to take responsibility for Emma going forward. Linda nodded firmly. "That little girl needs us," she said. "She needs people who will love her honestly, not use her as a pawn." I scheduled the confrontation for a Tuesday evening after Emma had gone to bed. I wanted the child protected from whatever was about to happen. I also wanted witnesses. Frank agreed to be present, along with Patricia Holloway, who brought documentation of everything we had uncovered. Marcus came downstairs to find us all sitting in the living room. His expression shifted from confusion to suspicion, to something darker as he realized this was not a casual gathering. "What is going on?" he asked. I stood up and faced my son. For a long moment, I just looked at him, tried to see the boy I had raised, tried to understand how we had ended up here. Then I spoke. "We know everything, Marcus. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the debt, the insurance policies, the conservatorship plan. We know all of it." Marcus' face went through several transformations. First denial, claiming he did not know what I was talking about. Then anger, accusing us of invading his privacy and turning against our own son. Then, when Patricia Holloway spread the documentation across the coffee table, fear. Finally, he tried a different approach. He became the wounded child, the victim of circumstances beyond his control. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice cracking. "The gambling got out of control. I was desperate. But I would never actually hurt Mom. I love her. I love this family." Linda spoke for the first time since Marcus had entered the room. "You made me believe I was losing my mind," she said, her voice steady and cold. "You watched me suffer, and you kept pushing, kept making me doubt myself. That is not love. That is cruelty." Marcus looked at his mother like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. The woman he had tried to manipulate was not broken. She was strong, and she was done being his victim. I told Marcus he had to leave. Immediately. That night. He could take his personal belongings, but nothing else. He was not welcome in our home anymore. He protested. He begged. He threatened. Where would he go? What about Emma? We could not do this to our own son. I held firm. "You are my son," I said, "and I will always love you. But what you did to your mother is unforgivable. The door will always be open for you to come back, but only when you have become a better man. Only when you have gotten help and made real changes." Frank stood beside me, making it clear that Marcus had no support in this room. Patricia Holloway reminded him that we had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges if necessary. The threat was implicit but clear. Marcus packed a single suitcase in silence. He did not look at Linda as he carried it down the stairs. He did not look at me as he walked to the front door. At the threshold, he paused. He did not turn around. "You will regret this," he said quietly. And then he walked out into the night. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, and I felt something I had not expected. Relief. The threat was gone. The manipulation was over. Linda was safe. A few minutes later, we heard small footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Where is Daddy going?" she asked. Linda went to her and knelt down, gathering the child into her arms. "Daddy needs to go away for a while," she said gently. "He has some things he needs to work on by himself. But Grandma and Grandpa are here. We are not going anywhere." Emma nodded, accepting this explanation with the trust of a child who believes the adults in her life will always protect her. Looking at Linda holding our granddaughter, I realized that despite everything we had won, we had protected our family. We had stood up against manipulation and cruelty, even when it came from someone we loved. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most important. The weeks following Marcus' departure were not easy. Linda had nightmares. She would wake up in cold sweats, reaching for me in the dark, needing reassurance that she was not crazy, that what had happened was real. I held her every time and reminded her of the truth. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in recovery from psychological abuse. The sessions were difficult at first. Linda had to confront not just what Marcus had done to her, but how deeply she had absorbed his manipulation. She had to relearn to trust her own mind. But slowly, steadily, she began to heal. I watched the woman I married re-emerge from the shadow that had fallen over her. She started laughing again, real laughter that filled the house. She reclaimed her relationship with Emma without fear or second-guessing. She planted new flowers in the garden, cooked elaborate meals, just because she felt like it, and sang along with the radio when she thought no one was listening. Emma became the center of our world in the best possible way. Linda taught her to bake bread from scratch, a skill her own grandmother had passed down. I showed her how to use basic tools in the garage, and she proudly helped me fix a leaky faucet. We read to her every night, taking turns doing voices, making her giggle until she could not keep her eyes open. She started calling us her favorite people in the whole world. And we meant it when we told her she was ours. About 6 months after Marcus left, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was a rehabilitation facility 3 states away. Inside was a single page handwritten in Marcus' familiar script. He wrote that he had checked himself into a program for gambling addiction. He wrote that he was also seeing a counselor who was helping him understand why he had manipulated the people closest to him. He wrote that he was not asking for forgiveness, yet because he knew he had not earned it. He just wanted us to know that he was trying to become better. Linda and I read the letter together at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Linda said, "I do not know if I will ever be able to forget what he did, but maybe someday I can forgive him." I nodded. "That is more than he deserves," I said. "But it is also exactly who you are." We did not respond to the letter right away. We were not ready. But we saved it in a drawer, a small sign that maybe eventually there could be a path back. In the meantime, we focused on what mattered most. Our home was peaceful. Our granddaughter was thriving. Our marriage was stronger than it had been in years, forged through fire into something unbreakable. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching Emma chase fireflies in the backyard while Linda laughed beside me, I found myself thinking about everything we had been through. I had spent my whole life working hard, trying to build something solid for my family. I thought I was doing everything right. And then my own son nearly destroyed everything I had built, not with a hammer, but with words and lies and manipulation. But here is what I learned. Love does not mean accepting everything. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is draw a line. Protect the people who need protecting. Stand firm, even when it breaks your heart. I also learned that you cannot control what other people become. You can give them every advantage, every opportunity, every ounce of love you have. And they still might make choices that hurt you. That is not your failure. That is their choice. The hardest lesson, though, was about forgiveness. I am still working on it. There are days when I think about what Marcus did, and my blood boils with anger. But there are other days when I remember the little boy who used to sit on my shoulders, and I feel only sadness for the man he became. I do not know if Marcus will ever truly change. I do not know if we will ever be a complete family again. But I know this. Linda and I have each other. We have Emma. We have learned that our worth is not defined by how our children treat us. And for now, that is enough. If you have made it this far, I want to thank you for listening to my story. It was not easy to tell, but I think it needed to be told. Because somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in a waiting room, wondering if they are losing their mind. Someone else is being slowly manipulated by someone they love and trust. If that is you, please hear me. Trust yourself. You are not crazy, and you do not have to face it alone. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had to draw a difficult line with someone you love? Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let me know. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories about real people facing real struggles. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter what you are going through, your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.